Hi, everybody. This is Moss Jackson, psychologist and success coach. I want to welcome you back, those of you who have been watching my Mondays with Moss. And if you're new, welcome as a new visitor. This is a weekly video series about living an extraordinary life, a life of success, accomplishment, and happiness. What I'm looking at in this series is looking at the notion of living an extraordinary life. Looking at questions like what's really important to you, what are you passionate about, what are the actions you need to take to live an extraordinary life, and how can you bounce back from upsets and disappointments and be resilient. The last several videos we've been looking at, number one, about a month ago, what does an extraordinary life look like? A second broadcast was on how to stay miserable. Some people are miserable. Thought it was helpful to give you an idea of 11 ways to stay miserable. And last week, I started to talk about how people go through life, in particular, life of a victim. So for my framework, my model, people go through life either as navigators, survivors, or victims. About 30% of the population that we know are victims, 50% are survivors, and around 20% are navigators. Navigators would be like Oprah Winfrey, Nelson Mandela, Richard Branson, probably Obama. Survivors would be George Costanza from Seinfeld, Larry David, you know that TV show, Larry David, pretty sad character, unbearable. Well, when I watch it, but I really enjoy the show anyway. And for survivors, probably Trump, Giuliani, the movie War of the Roses, where Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner are married and they're in battle and they kill each other at the end. They win at any cost, even if it kills them. So those are some examples of survivors, victims, and navigators. Today, I want to talk about the survivor mindset, a very interesting type of character, get a lot done. And by the way, if you want to find out if you're a navigator, survivor, victim, go to my website, navigatingforsuccess.com. www.navigatingforsuccess.com, and fill out the questionnaire. It's a free questionnaire. How are you going through life? Are you a navigator? And we'll find out. It'll be very useful for you. So, in terms of the survivor's mindset, some key questions to ask yourself. Are you a master of the mind battle? The mind battle. And we have battles out here with external life, but the key battle that I'm focusing on is the internal battle, the battle in your mind. It's a lifelong challenge of managing that incessant chatter or voice that lives within each of us, the voice that pressures you to get upset, take things personally, make self-defeating assumptions, and blows minor upsets into major upsets. The voice in our head is not a very happy voice, and it seems to make a lot of trouble. It causes you to overheat. My first car, very old car, I put water in the radiator, but if I go up a hill or if I, on a hot day, it would overheat, and then I had to stop and let it cool off. The voice in your head makes you overheat. It talks you into trouble, and you get overheated emotionally, okay? And sometimes you need to take a pause and calm yourself down. The key with the mind battle is to hear your voices, but don't believe them. They're just thoughts that materialize as a voice. We can actually hear them. Actually, if you want to hear your voice really clearly, next time you take a shower, just listen to the voice in your head. It will not allow you to take a shower with peace and comfort. It will tell you things to worry about, to get upset about. So I want to give you an example of a survivor. I once had a client, Jim, age 42. His goal was to make a ton of money and to report to nobody, to be his own boss. He hated reporting to anybody. Very resentful, angry kind of guy for past upsets and disappointments, and feelings of betrayal, particularly from his father. So had a real grudge and a resentment. Now remember, Sartre, the French philosopher, said if you want to be in hell, you don't have to wait until you die. Just wake up and every day spend a considerable amount of attention and time on your past regrets and resentments, and that's what hell is. Well, Jim was in hell, okay? He was determined to be a winner, definitely not a loser. His father would call him a loser, a wuss, a lot of other negative names, and Jim devoted himself when he was a young teenager, committed himself to be a winner at any cost. He had considerable wealth. He really did quite well in his business. Others saw him as successful. Yet he was angry and miserable. His wife, he judged her. She was quite unhappy with him. He would be really resentful that she spent his money, not our money. He tended to be a blamer, took very little responsibility for anything, and just blamed others for his misery. He had what's called a performance mindset. Performance mindset is you have to live up to a certain image. And if you fail to live up to the image, you feel frustrated, unhappy, or angry. That's very different than the navigator's mindset, which is a growth mindset, a mindset called, of course I'm going to screw up. Of course I'm going to make mistakes. But the key is I'm going to learn from my mistakes and not make the same mistake again. So he felt alone. Jim's North Star, his guiding light, was win at any cost. Get the other guy before he gets you. He was a lone wolf with very little capacity for empathy, compassion, or being connected to people. He really was quite a loner. When people got him, when he had upsets, he would blame the upset and blame other people for his behavior. Took very little responsibility. So, pretty unhappy guy. Another time I'll talk to you about what we did in therapy to move him out of that, because he's no longer in survivor mode. It was a big battle. It was a big challenge for me. Survivors, in general, are fighters. They endure hardship. They prevail against the odds, my way or the highway. They elbow their way through life. They create a lot of roadkill. I've had a number of very, very successful presidents of companies, owners of companies, high execs, sometimes professional athletes who had to win at any cost, and they never developed the emotional intelligence called compassion, caring, and self-regulation. They needed to win to feed their ego. The ego is that part of us that says not good enough, the voice in the head. I'm going to call the voice in the head the ego, okay? So some keys to managing surviving. If you're a survivor, here's some ideas to consider. First of all, we all need survivor skills. Life is hard, and there are a lot of hardships. You need to persevere and be resilient. You got to bounce back. So it's good to have survivor skills, but not necessarily to be a survivor. Any strength to a weakness, any strength to an excess is a weakness. Any strength to an excess is a weakness. So being a survivor is a strength. It's an asset. But if it's done to an excess, it's a weakness. It's like if you're always using a hammer for every tool, instead of a screwdriver, some glue, or scotch tape, or a saw, is pounding everything, that's using a skill to an excess. It does a lot of damage. Being a survivor is like it's hard to turn off the smoke detector, this fire alarm in your head, in the back of your brain, so to speak. It's not a real fire detector, but that's the analogy, that it goes off to trigger us about danger, danger, danger. So with the survivor, that smoke detector is going on all the time. They're always looking for trouble and then willing themselves to fight against all odds. Sometimes in being a survivor, it might be useful to ask yourself, when is it useful for me to be a survivor and take those survivor actions? And when can I let things go? I don't have to fight every battle. Don't have to be a hammer with every situation. You may also notice how often anger and competition show up in your daily life. Is every encounter a battle? Or some encounters are like, I don't need to fight this battle. Another question to ask is, do you trust more than you worry about betrayal and being taken advantage of? I think survivors probably more worried about being taken advantage of, and they can't allow that to happen, so they don't necessarily trust readily. Okay. Another idea is ask what's important. Lorettas Principle, which is a principle devised by an Italian researcher in the 19th century, was he found that about 20% of the farmers produce 80% of the profit. So in real life, nowadays, you want to take a look at what's really important. What are the 20% of the goals and actions that you want to take that would really allow you to be productive? What's really important? And also ask yourself the cost of being a survivor and not doing what's really important. Sometimes by asking yourself what's important, you may take a step back and say, maybe I need to learn to do something I don't know how to do. I think also it's really helpful if you're a survivor to pause, to take a time out and unwind before you react. So I've always had a strong survivor instinct in me, kind of a street kid. So I remember a number of times I would get angry at my wife if she criticized me in the car. And my mother's voice would show up in my head, and I would get kind of nasty and yell at her. And I saw that, and I said, I don't like that. So what was important for me was to have a mutually caring, respectful relationship with my wife. So I promised myself to take a high-impact action called shut my mouth when I'm angry. Don't express my anger when she says, why'd you make a left turn? Or why are we going this way? Or why are we leaving at this hour? I would just pause for a minute and calm myself down. And then I would answer. I'd just say, wow, you sound like you think this is a stupid left turn, or I shouldn't do this. And he'd say, yeah, I think it's stupid. So I would let it be. I wouldn't fight that battle. And really, within 2 to 5 minutes, I'd be very calm, be back in well-being with my wife, and we could engage and talk about it. No big deal. Another good idea is you might want to imagine your funeral. Imagine your funeral. And ask yourself, say you have about 250 people at your funeral, and you are watching, you're sitting in the audience, or maybe in the casket, and people one by one are coming up. Your wife is coming up, your children are coming up, friends, people with whom you've been in business, they're coming up to give their thoughts about what it was like having you in their life. What would they say about you? What do you want them to say about you? Do you want them to say you were Scrooge and you were a son of a bitch? And or something different. Because if you're listening to their voices and you want something different, then you need to change your behavior. Anyway, that's my thoughts today on being a survivor. Next week I'll be talking about going through life as a navigator. And hope you stay tuned to Mondays with Moss. And if you like what I'm saying and you want to check out my books, go to Amazon.com and take a look at the books under Moss Jackson. See you soon. Bye-bye.